You know, sometimes all it takes is a smell, just a whiff of something warm and sweet, and you're right back there, standing in a place you thought you'd long forgotten. Happened to me just this morning. I pulled an old pie out of the oven, apple cinnamon, just like Mama used to make, and Lord have mercy, it was like the whole kitchen spun around me. For a second there, I wasn't 65 years old, sitting here in my little house outside of Bowling Green. No sir, I was 20 again. Belly out to here with my baby girl, dirt on my hands, sweat on my brow, and more worry in my heart than I care to admit. You young folks wouldn't understand, but back in my day, smells had a way of sticking to you. The sweet, sticky smell of fresh tobacco hanging up in the curing barns, the damp earth after a long rain, even the smoke curling up from our old wood stove late at night. They weren't just smells, honey, they were little pieces of life itself. And today, standing over that pie, I swear I could feel her kicking inside me all over again. Strong, determined, like she already knew she had a tough road ahead, but she wasn't gonna give up, no ma'am. I'll tell you what, there's a story I've carried in my heart for more years than I can count. I never told it much, not even to my kids. Some things just settle down deep inside you, you know? But lately, maybe it's all this quiet time I have, or maybe it's just the way the world's been spinning so fast. Lately, I've been thinking, maybe it's time I finally shared it. Maybe somebody out there needs to hear it. It was the late 1960s, right outside of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Back when $1 could buy you a whole sack of flour, if you were lucky enough to have $1. We didn't have a pot to pee in most days. My husband, bless his soul, was working long hours at the factory, wearing down his hands for little more than peanuts. We already had a little boy, just a tiny thing, full of life and mischief. And me? Well, I was pregnant again. 7 months along, and working like a mule on a tobacco farm just to keep beans on the table. I still remember the way the fields looked that summer. Row after row of green tobacco leaves, waving in the hot wind, heavy with the promise of somebody else's fortune, never ours. The sun would beat down so hard some days, the dirt would crack right open like an old man's skin. I'd be out there, belly leading the way, bending down, picking leaves, hanging em up in the barns, day after day, just praying the good Lord would keep me and that baby safe. There were nights I'd sit by the wood stove, rubbing my swollen belly, humming soft little tunes, Patsy Cline mostly, sweet dreams crazy, just trying to keep my spirits up. And I'd whisper to that little one, hang on, baby girl. Mama's trying her best. You know, thinking back, it's almost funny how clear it all feels now. Funny and a little bit cruel. Because at the time, I didn't know if we'd make it. I didn't know if that baby would come into a world with a roof over her head or food in her belly. I didn't know nothing really except that love was the only thing I had to give, and I was gonna give it all. So, if you'll sit a spell with me, I'd like to tell you the rest of it. The hard parts. The hopeful parts. The way a mother's love can outlast just about anything, even a hard Kentucky winter. I reckon it's a story worth telling. Maybe it'll remind you of somebody you love. Maybe it'll remind you of yourself. And I'll just ask you this before we start. When was the last time a smell, a song, or a memory stopped you dead in your tracks and took you back to a place you thought you'd left behind? I reckon if you're gonna understand the whole story, we gotta go back a little further. Back before the baby kicks, before the tobacco fields, before the long nights by the stove. Back to when I was just a little girl, growing up not too far from here, out in the hills of Kentucky. Lord have mercy, times were hard even back then, but when you're young, you don't know you're poor. You just know you're happy when you got a creek to splash in and a slice of cornbread on your plate. Our house was small, just a little clapboard thing with a leaky roof and a front porch that sagged something awful. Daddy did his best patching it up with whatever scraps he could find. Mama kept a garden out back, tomatoes, beans, squash, and what we didn't grow, we mostly did without. We made do with what we had. That's just the way things were back then. I was the oldest of 4, so right from the get-go I had more responsibility than most. I helped Mama haul water from the well, helped Daddy chop wood when his back gave out, watched over the little ones when they got into more trouble than a barrel of kittens. I learned early that life wasn't gonna hand you anything easy, and if you wanted something, you'd better be ready to work for it. But you know, I didn't mind much. I figured that's just how the good Lord made the world. A little hard, a little beautiful, all mixed up together. When I was about 12, I used to lie out in the field behind our house, watching the clouds roll by, dreaming about the big world beyond the hills. I thought maybe someday I'd move to a big town, maybe be a teacher, wear nice dresses, and have a proper stove that didn't smoke up the whole kitchen. I believed, with all my young heart, that if you worked hard and treated folks right, good things would find their way to you. That was the way Mama taught me, Martha Jean, she'd say, kindness costs you nothing, and it'll carry you farther than a shiny dollar ever will. Lord, how I held on to those words. By the time I turned 16, though, those big dreams started to shrink down to fit the size of my world. I met a boy, tall and quiet, with a smile that could melt butter right off a biscuit. We courted for a good while, sitting out on the porch swing, holding hands, talking about nothing and everything. Wasn't long before we married. Didn't have a big wedding or fancy cake, just a preacher, a Bible, and a couple of good neighbors to stand up with us. That's how we did it in those days. Simple. Honest. I thought then that life was set out like a straight road. You get married, you work hard, you raise a family, and the Lord looks out for you. I didn't know about all the twists and turns that were waiting up ahead. Didn't know about the nights I'd cry into my pillow wondering how we'd make it through another winter. Didn't know about the backbreaking work, the empty cupboards, the prayers whispered into the dark. But I guess that's the blessing of being young. You carry hope around like it's stitched right into your bones, and no amount of hardship can tear it loose. Back then, I still believed that good things came to good people, and that love was enough to fill all the empty spaces. And maybe in some ways, I was right. Even now, after all these years, after all the hard miles and harder lessons, I still hold tight to that little piece of hope. It's smaller now, maybe a little worn around the edges, but it's still there, tucked away deep inside. So, if you can picture it, a barefoot girl with a sunburned nose, hair in pigtails, standing knee-deep in a bean patch, dreaming about a better life, then you're standing right where my story really begins. I guess life has a funny way of throwing things at you when you least expect it. One minute you're dreaming in a bean patch, and the next, the whole course of your life takes a sharp turn without so much as a bye or leave. That's how it was the day I met Thomas Ray. Lord have mercy, I wasn't looking for love. No, ma'am. I had chores to do, a family to help, dreams tucked away like letters in a hope chest. But there he was, standing at the church picnic with that easy grin and a cowlick he couldn't do a thing with. He wasn't much to look at, not like some of the slick boys from town, but there was a kindness about him, a stillness, like he carried a piece of peace wherever he went. I couldn't rightly explain it, but when our eyes met across that dusty churchyard, my heart gave one hard thump, like it was trying to jump clean out of my chest. Now, I wasn't the type to get flustered. I was raised to keep my head down and my wits about me. But land sakes alive, that day I felt like a summer storm had come up out of nowhere and left me standing there with my mouth half open and my feet stuck to the ground. He walked right over, bold as brass, and tipped his hat, a real gentleman's move, and said, "Name's Thomas. You mind if I sit a spell?" Well, I'll tell you what. I didn't mind one bit. We sat on an old bench under a maple tree, the kind that gives off that sweet smell when the sun's been beaten down on it all day. We talked about nothing much. The weather, the price of eggs, how his truck kept back for something fierce, but it felt like the most important conversation of my life. I didn't know it then, but that one afternoon would change everything. I went home that night with my head full of him, my cheeks sore from smiling, and my heart all tangled up in hopes and worries I wasn't sure how to name. I sat by the window long after the house had gone quiet, staring out at the moon and wondering what it was about him that made the world feel just a little bit different. Maybe it was the way he listened, real close, like every word I said mattered. Maybe it was the way he laughed, low and easy, like he hadn't a care in the world. Or maybe it was just that he saw me, not the farm girl with dirt under her nails and patched up dresses, but the dreamer underneath it all. A week later, he showed up at our place with a handful of wildflowers he'd picked from down by the river. Not store-bought, mind you, the real kind, the kind that grow where they please and don't apologize for it. That told me more about his heart than 1,000 pretty words ever could. Daddy wasn't too sure about him at first, said he looked like he had more heart than sense, but Mama just smiled that knowing smile of hers and baked up a mess of biscuits like we were expecting company from heaven itself. Over the next few months, Thomas and I spent every moment we could snatch together. Walking down dusty roads, sitting on fence posts, talking about what we wanted out of life. He talked about building a little house with his own 2 hands, raising a family, working hard, loving harder. And me? I started to believe that maybe the life I dreamed about, the warm stove, the safe place to lay your head, the kind of love that didn't blow away when the first hard wind came, maybe it wasn't just foolishness after all. I didn't know then how much hardship was waiting for us just round the bend. Didn't know about the nights we'd shiver under thin blankets or the days our bellies would ache from not enough supper. But I knew deep down, sitting there beside him on those long golden evenings, that whatever came, it was better to face it with someone whose heart beat true. That's the thing about life. Sometimes you can't see the road ahead worth a lick, but your heart knows when you're standing at the start of something real. And that day at the church picnic, well, my heart knew. It knew before my head ever caught up. Life has a way of testing you, same as the river tests the stones it rolls over year after year. You think you're settling into a good rhythm, and then, just like that, the bottom drops out. It wasn't long after Thomas and I got married that the first real troubles came knocking. At first, it was just little things. His job at the mill wasn't steady. Some weeks he got hours, some weeks he didn't. Money was tight, tighter than a tick on a hound dog. We scraped by, patching up our clothes, stretching meals, making do the best we could. But deep down, there was this low hum of worry that never quite left me, like a storm rumbling just over the hills. Then one cold October morning, the bad news came for real. Thomas lost his job. Factory cutbacks, they said. Nothing personal. But Lord, it felt personal. Felt like somebody had reached right down into our little life and yanked the rug out from under us. I remember standing on our porch, watching him walk up the dirt road, hat in his hand, shoulders slumped like the weight of the whole world was bearing down on him. I wanted to run to him, to tell him it would all be all right, but the truth was, I didn't know if it would. We tried to find work wherever we could. He picked up odd jobs fixin' fences, clearin' brush, haulin', whatever folks needed haulin'. I took in mending, sewing up ripped shirts, patchin' breeches for half a loaf of bread or a few pennies. Some days we made enough for supper. Some days we didn't. I'll never forget the way hunger gnaws at you, not just at your belly, but at your pride, your hope, your very soul. And then, right in the middle of all that mess, we found out I was expectant again. Lord have mercy. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mostly, I just sat real still, hand over my belly, scared half to death. We could barely feed the three of us. How were we supposed to care for another little one? I didn't tell nobody for a long while, not even Thomas, not right away. I carried that secret around like a stone in my pocket, heavy and cold. Part of me felt ashamed that we couldn't do better, ashamed that I was bringing a baby into such a hard world. And let me tell you, back in those days, folks talked. They talked if you didn't have nice things. They talked if your clothes were patched more than they were whole. They sure talked if you were expecting another mouth to feed when you could barely take care of the ones you had. Poor Martha Jean, they'd whisper, bless her heart, she don't know when to quit. I held my head up when I had to, but inside, I was boiling over with a mix of shame and anger and fear. I wanted to shout at them, tell them they didn't know the first thing about love or hope or what it meant to hold on when the world was trying to shake you loose. Thomas, bless his heart, he tried to stay strong for us. He never once blamed me, never once made me feel like a burden. He'd just look at me with those steady blue eyes and say, we'll figure it out, darling. We always do. But even he couldn't hide the worry in his face some nights when he thought I wasn't looking. I spent a lot of evenings sitting out back, staring up at the stars, wondering if the good Lord had forgotten about us. I prayed hard, not for riches or comfort, but just for a way through, a way to keep my babies safe, a way to keep Thomas's spirit from breaking, a way to keep believing that better days were still ahead. That was the hardest part, you see, not the hunger, not the work, not even the cold. It was the doubt. It crept in quiet, like smoke under a door, and once it got inside, it was awful hard to push back out. There were nights I thought maybe we'd made a terrible mistake, thought maybe dreams were for folks richer, smarter, luckier than us. But then I'd feel that little flutter inside my belly, just a whisper of a kick, and somehow it gave me the strength to stand up and face another day. I reckon there are days in a person's life that carve themselves into your memory so deep, no amount of years can wear them away. 1 minute, you're just living, doing the best you can, and the next, everything you thought you knew is turned upside down. For me, that day came one bitter cold morning in January, when the world outside was frozen stiff, and the world inside my heart near about broke clean in two. I was 7 months along by then, big as a barn, tired right down to my bones. Thomas had gone off to do some work for a neighbor, mending a busted fence, trying to scrape up a little money so we could buy flour and beans for the week. I stayed back with our little boy, busying myself with sewing patches on his breeches, humming low to the baby rollin' inside me. Around mid-morning, I heard the knock. Not a friendly knock either. It was sharp, urgent, made the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. I opened the door to find old Mr. McKinney from down the road, hat in hand, face all drawn and pale. I knew right then something was wrong. You just know, deep down in your gut. He didn't even have to say it, but he did anyhow. Martha Jean, he said, voice thick and low, there's been an accident. Thomas, he fell. The fence gave way. Lord have mercy, it felt like the whole world stopped in. I swear I couldn't hear nothing but the rush of blood in my ears. It was like everything else, the wind, the birds, the creak of the trees just went quiet. I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to keep from falling clean over. My little boy tugged at my skirt, looking up at me with those wide, scared eyes, and I knew I had to be strong. But inside, I was screaming, so loud I thought my heart might just tear itself apart. Thomas was alive, thank the good Lord, but he was bad hurt. Broken leg, busted ribs, had knocked something awful. Couldn't work, couldn't hardly sit up in bed without help. And just like that, we lost what little steady income we had. I'll tell you what, there ain't no feeling lonelier in the world than standing there looking at the man you love, knowing he needs you more than ever, knowing the baby inside you needs you too, and feeling like you ain't near strong enough to carry it all. I sat by his bedside that night, holding his hand, watching the firelight dance on the walls, listening to him breathe shallow and rough. I thought about leaving for a minute, not him, no, never him, but maybe leaving for my folks' place a few counties over, where there was at least food on the table and a warm bed. I hated myself for thinking it. Felt like betrayal just to let the thought cross my mind. But Lord, I was scared. Scared in a way I ain't never been before or since. That night, when everything was still and the clock on the mantel ticked so loud it about split my head open, I made a choice. I promised myself, right there and then, that I wouldn't run. That I'd find a way to carry us all through, no matter how heavy the load got. I didn't know how, Lord knows I didn't, but I knew I had to, because that's what love does. It don't quit when things get hard. It don't walk away when the storm clouds gather. It digs its heels in and says, "Not today, devil. Not today." Looking back now, I realize that was the night I stopped being a girl and became a woman. Not because I wanted to, not because I was ready, but because life didn't give me a choice. And maybe, just maybe, that's the way real strength is born, not in moments of glory, but in the long, quiet nights when your heart is breaking and you stand up anyway. You know, sometimes in life, it feels like you've hit rock bottom and there ain't no way but up. I reckon I'd been at that rock bottom for a while. The days dragged on, one after another, heavy as a lead weight. Thomas was still down, barely able to move around, and I was doing the best I could to keep the farm going, keep us fed, keep some kind of rhythm to the day. But it wasn't enough. I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, and every night I'd sit beside the fire, too tired to even close my eyes. And then, one morning, right when I thought I couldn't take another step, something changed. I remember it like it was yesterday. The air had that sharp, cold bite to it, the kind that makes you think winter's gonna hang around forever. But something about that morning felt different. It was early, the sun just beginning to peek over the hills, and I was out in the yard, putting the chickens in the coop, when I heard a car pull up. Not the usual neighbor, not someone asking for help with a tractor or to borrow a jug of milk. It was a stranger, a man I didn't know. He rolled down his window, tipped his hat, and introduced himself as Mr. Benton from the nearby town. I didn't know him, but there was something about him, something warm like a summer's day, that made me stop, made me listen. "I heard about your troubles, Mrs. Lawson," he said, his voice calm but strong, "and I've got a proposition for you." I stood there, wiping my hands on my apron, waiting for him to continue. He went on, telling me how he'd heard from a neighbor that I was the best seamstress in the county, that my work was worth more than I gave credit for. I remember thinking, Lord, does he know what he's talking about? I'd always just patched up shirts and mended torn hems, never thinking it was anything special. Mr. Benton said he was starting a new business in town, a general store, and he needed someone to help with alterations, repairs, and even a few custom pieces. He offered me a job, not a huge one, mind you, but a steady one, enough to keep food on the table and maybe a little more. At first, I didn't know whether to believe him or to feel like he was just being kind out of pity. But something in the way he looked at me told me he was serious. For the first time in a long while, I felt a spark. A flicker of hope, like a tiny light that had been hidden for so long, finally finding a way to shine. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I could pull it off. But I knew one thing for certain: I had to try. So I took the job. That was the moment, I suppose, when everything began to shift. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't some miracle falling from the sky. It was just a small step, a chance to do something outside of just surviving. For the first time in months, I had something to look forward to, something I could do that was mine, that was real. I remember walking home from Mr. Benton's that day, the ground still frozen underfoot, but somehow feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit more hopeful. I started working for him every afternoon after I'd finished with the farm. At first, it wasn't easy. I was tired, I was overwhelmed, and I didn't have much time to spare. But slowly, the work became more than just a way to make ends meet. It became a lifeline. I was making something beautiful with my hands again, something that had value. It was like I was reminding myself that I wasn't just the woman who had to fight to keep the lights on. I was more than that, and I didn't have to do it alone. As the weeks passed, things started to change. The work at the store got busier. Thomas was healing, slowly but surely. I could see the strength coming back into him, the old sparkle in his eyes returning. It wasn't easy, no, it was never easy, but there was a rhythm to it now, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we could make it through. I started to believe that maybe the hard times weren't gonna last forever. Maybe, just maybe, there was light at the end of this long tunnel. And that's the funny thing about hope. Sometimes, it doesn't come roaring in like a wild storm. It sneaks up on you, one little step at a time, until you look back and realize how far you've come. That day, when Mr. Benton offered me that job, was the first step towards something better. And even though it wasn't a miracle, and it wasn't a big, grand gesture, it gave me something I hadn't had in a long while, a reason to believe again. There comes a time in every life when you have to look yourself in the eye and say, enough. I've done what I can. Now, it's time to decide how to move forward. For me, that moment came one hot summer evening when the world outside was so quiet, you could hear the buzz of the crickets and the soft shuffle of the wind through the trees. I'd been working hard, sewing, mending, doing what I could to keep the house together, keep the family fed. But all the work in the world wasn't gonna fix what was inside me. I was carrying around years of hurt, years of decisions I hadn't been brave enough to face. It was like I was suffocating, but didn't know how to breathe again. Thomas had started to get stronger, praise the Lord. He was back at the mill, working steady, and I was proud of him more than words could ever say. My little boy was healthy, Logan, and running around the yard like any normal kid. And my baby girl? Well, she was still kicking inside me, as strong and stubborn as ever, ready to make her entrance into this hard world. But as I sat there, sewing up a pair of pants in the dim light of the kitchen, I realized something. I hadn't let go of my past. I was still carrying around that stone in my chest, the one that weighed me down, the shame, the guilt, the fear. I hadn't forgiven myself for all the moments I felt weak, for all the times I thought I couldn't go on, for the days when I let myself believe I was not enough. That night, I went out to the old woodpile, the one we'd been using to keep the stove fed all winter. The firewood was almost gone, but I still had a few old logs sitting there, waiting to be chopped. I looked at Em for a long while, just standing there, feeling that heavy ache in my chest. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up that old axe and swung it down hard on the log. It split right in two, and for the first time in years, I felt like something inside me was split wide open too. That was it. The moment. The turning point. It wasn't the log, or the axe, or even the sweat on my brow. It was me, finally choosing to let go of what had been holding me back. The past, the hurt, the shame, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I had done the best I could with what I had, and I was still standing. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't all healed. But I was still here, and that was enough. That night, I sat on the porch swing, the air warm around me, and I whispered to myself, I choose to live. I choose to keep going. I choose not to be defined by the things that tried to break me. It was a quiet kind of peace, Not the kind you shout about or celebrate in big ways, but the kind that fills you up slowly, like a glass of water when you've been thirsty for too long. I remember the sound of the crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, the steady rhythm of my own heart, finally feeling like it was my own again. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not from the struggle, not from the work, but from the weight I'd been carrying inside me all these years. It wasn't easy. I won't lie to you. There were still days when I felt like the world was on my shoulders. There were days when I wondered if I was enough, when I worried about what the future would bring. But I had made my choice. I had decided to live for today, to live for the people I loved, and most of all, to live for myself. No more looking back, no more second guessing. I had no more time for regrets. I was ready to be the woman I always knew I could be. I know now that life doesn't always give you second chances. Sometimes, you've got to make your own. You've got to decide to stand up, pick up the pieces, and move forward, even when you don't know what's ahead. And that's exactly what I did. That night, when I went inside to put the kettle on for tea, I looked at my reflection in the window. I didn't see the tired woman I'd been. I saw the woman I had become, strong, steady, ready for whatever was next. And I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever came next, I was gonna be okay. You know, as I sit here now, I can't help but think about how much has changed. It feels like a lifetime ago when I was just a young girl, dreaming big, trying to figure out how to survive and how to love in this world that doesn't always make sense. Back then, I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I was good enough, that things would fall into place. I thought that life had a set path, a way of rewarding the faithful, the hardworking, the ones who never gave up. But I'll tell you what, life isn't that simple. It's not all about working yourself to the bone and waiting for the world to hand you what you deserve. No, life is about learning to live with what you've got and making the best of it. It's about choosing to rise, no matter how many times you fall, and finding beauty in the struggle, not just the victory. Looking back now, I can see it. I can see how all the pieces of my life came together, even when it seemed like nothing was going right. All those years of struggle, all those moments when I thought I couldn't go on, they weren't wasted. They shaped me. They made me who I am. And the hardest moments? Those were the ones that taught me the most. I didn't learn much from the good days, not really. I learned from the hard ones, the days when I had to dig deep to find the strength to keep going, even when I thought I had nothing left to give. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that sometimes you have to stop waiting for things to change on their own. You can't wait for someone to come along and save you. You can't wait for the perfect moment. Sometimes you just have to decide. You have to decide that you're going to live, that you're going to move forward, even if you don't know where you're going. I learned that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. Life moves on, with or without you. And you can either step into it or you can let it pass you by. But the longer you wait, the harder it is to catch up. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It's never easy. But I am saying that when you finally make that choice, when you decide to live for today, to live for yourself, to stop looking back at what you can't change, that's when you start to feel free. And it doesn't come all at once, no. It comes slowly, like a warm breeze that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. It fills you up, little by little, until you realize that you've been carrying around all this weight for no reason, that all that worry and doubt didn't have to be there at all. What I've come to understand is that it's not the things we lose, the things we think we've failed at, that define us. It's the way we choose to carry on, the way we choose to love and live despite the pain. I look at my children now, and I think about the life I've built, and I realize that it's all worth it. Every long day, every moment of doubt, every time I thought I couldn't do it. Because I did. We did. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe it's that the hard times don't break you unless you let them. They don't have the power to destroy you. Not unless you give them that power. The strength you need to carry on? It's already inside you. It's been there all along, just waiting for you to realize it. And once you do, once you really understand that you're stronger than you think, that's when you can finally let go of the past and move forward. I reckon that's the real gift I've learned. To stop waiting for a miracle, to stop waiting for life to hand me a reason to keep going. To realize that sometimes the miracle is just choosing to live, choosing to love, choosing to find joy in the small things. The work, the laughter, the quiet moments by the fire, that's where life happens. So maybe it's time for you too to stop waiting. Maybe it's time to stop letting the past weigh you down, to stop waiting for the perfect time. The perfect time is now. The perfect time is when you decide it is. And that, my friend, is all the time you need. Well, here we are. I suppose there comes a time when every story reaches its end, and you look back and see how far you've come. But I don't think it's really an end, you know? Not for me, not for any of us. Maybe it's just another chapter. One that we keep with us, tucked in our hearts, for as long as we can remember it. Because sometimes, the real story isn't about what happened in the past. It's about how we carry it with us, how we live with it today, how we use what we learn to make our tomorrow a little bit better. You know, I've often thought about the way love works. Back in those days when I was younger, I thought love had to be big, grand, something you could see and touch. I thought love was the thing that would fix everything, the thing that made everything right. And, well, in some ways, I was right. Love does make the world go round, or at least it makes it worth living. But I also learned that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It's not always perfect. It doesn't always show up at the right time. But sometimes, love comes when you least expect it, and it carries you when you think you're too tired to carry on. And sometimes, love stays with you even when it's not there anymore, like the scent of a flower after it's gone, or the memory of a song that still plays in your heart. And so I find myself asking, after all these years, is love supposed to come back? Is it supposed to return after all that time? Do we get second chances? Or do we just keep holding on to what we had and make peace with what's gone? I'll tell you this, sometimes I still wonder. I wonder if he remembers. If deep down, Thomas ever thinks back to those quiet moments we shared, when everything was still and simple. Sometimes when I'm sitting by the fire at night, I swear I can feel it, that little spark of love, still burning in the quiet corners of my heart. But you know, it's not just about him. It's about me too. And it's about you. Sometimes, life asks us to make choices. Hard ones. Ones that break our hearts. Ones that tear us apart and then slowly put us back together again. I learned that even when life doesn't give you what you expect, it gives you what you need. It teaches you, little by little, that love isn't just something you wait for. It's something you create. Every day. In the way you love your family, your friends, even yourself. And so I ask you, just like I asked myself all those years ago, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for love to come back? Are you waiting for things to be perfect, for the right time, for the right moment? Or are you ready to take what you have today and make the most of it? Because if I've learned anything, it's that the best time to start is now. The best time to love is today, not tomorrow. Not in some perfect future. Today. Maybe, just maybe, love does come back sometimes. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean we stop loving. It doesn't mean we stop living. It means we keep moving, keep loving, keep hoping. Because love isn't just something you find, it's something you create. You carry it with you, through the hard times and the good. And even when it seems like everything has slipped away, love is still there, waiting for you to remember it, to feel it again, to give it again. So, I'll leave you with this. What are you going to do with the love that's inside you? Are you going to wait for it to return? Or are you going to use it right now, today, to make your life and the lives of those you love a little bit better. And sometimes, I think maybe it does come back in a way. Maybe love doesn't leave, not really. Maybe it's just been waiting for you to notice it again.